let me show you a small caveat which I guess you got to be aware of. And this is to do with the full IIS support of Windows Azure. So in our diagnostics demo, if you look at our new WebRole and compare and contrast both of them, you would see that there is an additional file called as webrole.cs, which is not present in our project called diagnostics demo. Now this file is actually the entry point for your WebRole, and this file and the output of this file is executed under a different process called as WAIIS host.exe. That's Windows Azure IIS host.exe. Now let's move this file and bring it our namespace. So I would just say that this is diagnostics demo. Compile it once. Perfect. Now what would happen if I add a trace dot write line over here and I say that this is hello WebRole, right? So let's try running this and let's put a breakpoint and see what happens. Now, as I mentioned that the webrole.cs would in fact execute under a different process. It won't pick up the configuration file what we have defined for diagnostics demo, and in that config file is where we have got the Windows Azure diagnostics trace listener defined. So if you see the trace over here, and let me just do a quick watch. So if you see the listeners which are defined for this trace, you would see that the first listener is the default trace listener, which is for your output window. And then the second trace listener is your development fabric trace listener. And if you look at the count of the trace listeners, it's only 2. And so those are the only 2 trace listeners what we have. So it is quite obvious that it has ignored the system.diagnostics what we have defined in web.config and this additional listener in here called as diagnostic monitor trace listener. So what we do is we add that additional configuration file into our diagnostics demo, and let's call this configuration file as we have to in fact call this as WAIIS host.exe.config, right? And just ensure that this too is copied if it's newer, right? And I would just take this system.diagnostics information and move that to this config, right? And that's all in fact what we need. So let's see that if I run this project again and if we hit our WebRole once again, do we get that additional trace listener or not? So let's start debugging, and we would again hit at the same breakpoint. And let's see what happens. So as we see that we get this breakpoint once again over here, and let's see the count of the listeners this time, and you see that the count of the listeners is actually 3. And let's further verify it by going to quick watch and bringing up the listener of 2, which is of course the dev fabric trace listener, but in the first listeners collection, the second item is our diagnostic monitor trace listener, what we were looking for. Perfect. So let's run this, and our app is up and running, and I would have to give it some time, but if you look at my ward logs table, in some time we should see. So let me just verify the deployment, and the deployment is 140, and what we got over there was the providers GUID. So you see that all these messages are actually coming in now, and these messages are coming from that Windows Azure IIS host.exe, and in some time we should see even the hello WebRole being populated over here. So as you see that you would need two configs. So one is for the IIS, that's your diagnostics demo, and the second one is for the Windows Azure IIS host.exe, which we created as WAIIS host.exe.config. And once the listener is present, and you see that this time there are two more messages out here, and if you see, you get this hello WebRole in here as well. So that's it for this demo on how to get started with Windows Azure Diagnostics. Let's move forward and see how do we integrate Windows Azure Diagnostics with Enterprise Library Logging Application Block. Thank you.